In October 1992, a pair of human arms were found wrapped in plastic bags and tossed into a dumpster behind a business in Tucson, Arizona. The discovery shocked the community. The victim, a 19-year-old woman named Diana Vicari, had vanished just days earlier. Her dismembered limbs were the only part of her ever recovered. No suspect has ever been convicted, no motive fully confirmed. And over 30 years later, the case remains cold. This is Unlocked Confidential. And today, we investigate one of the most haunting unsolved crimes in Arizona's history, the murder of Diana Vicari. Diana Vicari was just 19 years old when her life was violently cut short. Originally from California, she moved to Tucson and was living with her aunt and uncle while attending classes at Pima Community College. She had dreams of becoming an actress and had recently started taking drama classes. Friends and relatives described her as kind, trusting, and artistic. She worked at the local Tucson mall and was seen as a young woman trying to find her way. There was no known history of drug use, dangerous behavior, or conflicts with others. She appeared to be, in every way, a typical college student. That's what made what happened to her so chilling. There were no obvious signs that she was in danger, no known enemies, and yet she became the victim of one of the most gruesome unsolved crimes in the city's history. On the evening of October 20th, 1992, Diana Vicari arrived for a scheduled drama class at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. She was a dedicated student, known to take her studies seriously. This class was part of her regular routine, and nothing about her behavior that day suggested anything was wrong. Class ended at approximately 8 p.m. Several classmates later told investigators that Diana appeared calm, focused, and spoke briefly to one or two people before heading to the parking lot alone. She was last seen walking toward her white Ford Escort, which had been parked in the college lot. That walk, from the classroom to her car, was the final moment anyone can confirm her movements. After that, she vanished. When she didn't return home that night, her family grew concerned. This was out of character for Diana. She had no history of running away, no disputes with family, no indication that she was in any kind of trouble. She was reported missing the very next day. Police initiated a standard missing persons protocol, but very quickly, something felt wrong. Diana didn't withdraw any money. There was no activity on her bank account or social security number, and her friends hadn't heard from her. No phone calls, no notes, no sightings. Her car, wallet, and personal belongings were all missing as well. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. But the horrifying truth wouldn't be uncovered until 2 days later, when a sanitation worker made a discovery that would shock the city of Tucson. It was the morning of October 22, 1992, just before sunrise. A sanitation worker was performing a routine task, sorting through trash behind an industrial complex near downtown Tucson. As he lifted a heavy lid on one of the dumpsters, a pungent, foul odor hit him, stronger than anything he'd encountered on the job before. Inside were 2 large black plastic bags, tied off and sitting near the top of the garbage pile. Out of curiosity, or perhaps instinct, he opened one. Inside was what appeared to be a human arm, cleanly severed at the shoulder. He immediately called law enforcement. Tucson police responded to the scene within minutes, sealing off the area and calling in forensic specialists. Inside the second bag was a matching left arm. Both limbs were relatively clean, with no signs of decomposition beyond the expected early stages. They appeared to have been cut with precision, not ripped or torn. There were no defensive wounds, no bruising on the skin, no signs of restraint. Whoever had done this was meticulous. Crucially, there was no blood inside the dumpster. That indicated one thing: the arms had not been severed at the dump site. They had been transported there, possibly refrigerated or sealed beforehand, and disposed of with deliberate care. There were no fingerprints on the plastic bags, no nearby cameras, no witnesses who saw the drop-off. The arms, horrifying as they were, offered very few forensic leads. Still, they were enough. Using fingerprint analysis, the Tucson police confirmed what Diana's family feared the most. The remains belonged to 19-year-old Diana Vicari. But that's where the answers ended, and the real questions began. Because no other parts of her body were ever found. Not in that dumpster, not in the surrounding neighborhood, not in the days, weeks, or years that followed. Only her arms. This discovery transformed the case. It was no longer just a missing persons file, it was now an active homicide, and a particularly disturbing one. The nature of the dismemberment, the disposal, and the absence of the rest of her remains suggested that this crime wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, controlled, and it may have been designed to send a message or cover up something much worse. Diana Vicari had not simply disappeared. She had been hunted, killed, and partially erased. The nightmare was only beginning. Shortly after Diana's arms were discovered, police found her white Ford Escort parked about a mile away in a quiet Tucson neighborhood. The street was residential and calm, not the kind of place where a parked car would immediately raise suspicion. What stood out most was its location. The vehicle was found near the home of her drama teacher's fiancée's mother. Though the connection may have been coincidental, it raised questions. One's investigators never fully answered. The car itself showed no signs of a struggle. It was unlocked, the seats were undisturbed, and there was no blood or obvious evidence. Diana's purse was missing, but nothing else appeared stolen or tampered with. Police suspected the vehicle was intentionally placed in that neighborhood. Maybe the killer hoped to delay its discovery or steer attention in a misleading direction. There were no cameras, no known witnesses, and no fingerprints. Despite the odd proximity to someone she may have known through school, no viable suspect emerged from that lead. It was promising at first, but like so many aspects of this case, it led nowhere. In 1997, police thought they had a break. They arrested Lemuel Prion, a Utah inmate serving time for unrelated charges who had once lived near where Diana's car had been found. According to investigators, Prion had confessed to the murder while in prison. Two fellow inmates claimed he'd described details consistent with the case, details not released to the public. But when the case went to trial in 1999, the story collapsed. Prion's defense argued that the so-called confession was inconsistent and unverified, made up by jailhouse informants with something to gain. There was no DNA, no forensic evidence, and nothing tying him physically to the crime. He was acquitted. The failed prosecution raised a disturbing possibility that in their desperation, authorities had tried to force a solution to a case they couldn't solve. After Prion's acquittal, police explored other leads. One was John Mazure, a coworker from the Tucson Mall. He allegedly made Diana uncomfortable, and some coworkers said he seemed fixated on her. He was interviewed, but with no hard evidence or admission of guilt, he was never charged. Another name was Gregory Hatton, a convicted sex offender who had once worked at the same Sears store as Diana. He had a history of violence, and his background made him a logical suspect. But again, there were no witnesses, no DNA, and no solid link to Diana's disappearance. Both men remained on the radar, unofficially. But without evidence, the case stalled. The further time moved on, the more the investigation relied on theories and speculation, rather than facts. Why was Diana Vicari targeted? There was no evidence of robbery. Nothing was stolen. No evidence of sexual assault, at least none that could be proven given the state of the remains. And no message from the killer. Some theories suggest that Diana may have trusted the person who took her. Others speculate the dismemberment was meant to delay identification or destroy evidence. The clean nature of the amputation suggested some knowledge of anatomy, or at least access to sharp surgical tools. Whatever the motive, the level of precision and planning made this more than a random act. It was cold, calculated, and deeply personal. Tucson police reopened the case multiple times over the decades, but with little to go on. DNA testing advanced, but without additional remains or a crime scene, the physical evidence was simply too limited. In 2016, and again in 2021, cold case investigators attempted to build new profiles using forensic genealogy, but nothing concrete emerged. The case remains officially unsolved, though it continues to live in the minds of detectives who worked on it and citizens who remember the horror of that fall in 1992. More than 30 years later, the name Diana Vicari still haunts Tucson. Her killer is likely still alive, free, unidentified, unpunished. With no body, no forensic trail, and no definitive suspect, her case remains an emblem of the failures of our justice system to protect the vulnerable and prosecute the guilty. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened. And until they come forward, or until new evidence is found, Diana's story remains one of the most haunting cold cases in Arizona history. This is Unlocked Confidential. Subscribe for more investigations into the truths time tried to bury.